Sometimes the most ordinary moment becomes the one that changes everything. For Elias, a tired single father just trying to make it through another day, that moment came on a rainy highway when he saw a car wrapped around a guardrail. He pulled over without thinking and found a woman trapped inside, barely breathing. He stayed with her, held her hand, and kept her alive until the ambulance arrived. Then he drove home, never expecting to see her again. But the woman he saved that night was Celine, a billionaire who'd been living in secret, hiding from her own fortune. She never forgot the man who stopped when everyone else drove past. And soon she would show him that one act of kindness can open doors you never knew existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning, just like it did every weekday. Elias reached over and silenced it before the sound could wake Lila in the next room. The apartment was quiet, still dark outside, and cold enough that he could see his breath in the dim light filtering through the curtains. He sat up slowly, feeling the familiar ache in his lower back, the stiffness in his shoulders from yesterday's shift at the warehouse. He was 47 years old, and some mornings he felt every single year of it. The worn work boots sat by the bed where he'd left them the night before. Brown leather, scuffed and creased, the soles worn thin in places. He'd had them for 6 years now, longer than he'd had most anything else. They'd been with him through every shift, every double, every late night when he picked up extra hours. Because the rent was due, or Lila needed something for school. He pulled them on, lacing them tight, and stood. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, a living room that doubled as dining room and study space for Lila. But it was clean, and it was theirs. The she. Walls were covered with Lila's artwork from over the years. Drawings of houses she'd designed, buildings she'd imagined, colorful sketches that showed a mind far more creative than his own. There were photographs too. Him and Lila at the park, Lila's first day of middle school, and one photo he couldn't bear to take down, the 3 of them together, back when Sophia was still alive. That had been 3 years ago. Cancer. It had come, fast and taken her faster, leaving him with a 12-year-old daughter and a grief so heavy he sometimes forgot how to breathe under the weight of it. But he'd learned to carry it. He had to. Lila needed him. He made coffee in the old percolator, the one that sputtered and hissed but still worked. While it brewed, he packed his lunch, leftover pasta from dinner, an apple, a thermos for water. He left a note on the counter for Lila. "Morning, sweetheart, oatmeal in the pot, I'll be home by 4. Love you more than the world, Dad." The warehouse job started at 6. He was a forklift operator, moving pallets of goods from trucks to storage to loading docks. It was honest work, steady work, but it didn't pay much. Not enough for a man raising a daughter alone in a city where rent climbed higher every year. So 3 nights a week, he worked a second job, maintenance at an office building downtown, mopping floors, emptying trash, fixing what broke. He got home around midnight on those nights, slept 4 hours, and started again. It was the kind of tired that lived in your bones, but he never complained, not where Lila could hear. By the time he got home that afternoon, she was already back from school, sitting at the kitchen table with her math homework spread out in front of her. She looked up when he walked in, and her whole face brightened. "Dad, you're home early?" "Finished the inventory ahead of schedule," he said, setting his keys down. "How was school?" "Good. We started a new project in art class. I'm designing a community center." He smiled. "Of course you are." Lila had wanted to be an architect since she was 8 years old. She had notebooks full of building designs, sketches of homes and parks and libraries. She had a gift for it, a way of seeing spaces that he'd never had. Her teachers noticed it too. They told him she was talented, that she should apply to programs, to special schools. But those things cost money, money he didn't have. He pushed the thought away. "Show me after dinner. What do you want to eat? Can we have spaghetti again? We had that last night." "I know, but it's good," he laughed. "Spaghetti it is." They cooked together, something they'd been doing since Sophia died. It was one of the rhythms they'd built to hold themselves together. She chopped vegetables while he boiled water. They talked about her day, about her friends, about the history test she had coming up. He asked questions and listened carefully to her answers, watching the way her hands moved when she got excited about an idea, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she loved. She was so much like her mother, smart, curious, full of light. After dinner, they sat on the couch together, and she showed him her sketches for the community center project. It had wide windows to let in natural light, open spaces for gatherings, a rooftop garden. It was beautiful. Impractical, maybe, but beautiful. "You're going to be an amazing architect someday," he told her. She leaned against his shoulder. "Do you really think so?" "I know so." There was a pause, and then she said, "Dad, do you think I'll be able to go to college?" His chest tightened. He'd known the question was coming. She was getting older, starting to understand what things cost, what their life actually looked like. "Yes," he said, because he couldn't say anything else. "We'll figure it out." She nodded, but he could see the doubt in her eyes. She was 12, but she was old enough to know that figuring it out wasn't a plan, it was a hope. That night, after she'd gone to bed, he sat at the kitchen table and looked at the bills. Rent, utilities, groceries, Lila's school supplies. There was always something. He'd been saving what he could, putting away $20 or $30 a month when he was able, but the college fund was still painfully small. At this rate, it would take years to save enough, and she'd be applying in 6 years. He rubbed his eyes. He was tired, so tired, but he'd get up tomorrow and do it again, because that's what you did when you loved someone. You carried the weight, and you didn't let them see how heavy it was. He thought about Sophia sometimes, late at night like this. Wondered what she'd say if she could see them now. Wondered if she'd be proud of the job he was doing, or disappointed that he couldn't give Lila more. He liked to think she'd tell him he was doing his best, that love mattered more than money. But he couldn't help feeling like his best wasn't quite enough. He thought about the upcoming night shift, Wednesday, 3 days away. He'd need to arrange for Mrs. Kowalski next door to check on Lila, make sure she ate dinner and finished her homework. It was another expense. He paid her $20 each time, but it was necessary. He couldn't leave Lila alone all night. He stood, turned off the kitchen light, and checked on her one last time before bed. She was asleep, her face peaceful, an arm thrown over her head, the way she'd slept since she was a baby. He pulled the blanket up over her shoulders and kissed her forehead. "I'm going to give you the world," he whispered. Somehow. He didn't know how, but he meant it with everything he had. 3 nights later, on Wednesday evening, he kissed Lila goodbye and headed to his second job. The rain had started that afternoon and hadn't let up. By the time he finished his shift at midnight, it was coming down hard, drumming against the roof of his old truck as he pulled out of the parking lot. The highway was nearly empty, just a few sets of taillights ahead, blurred by the rain. His wipers worked overtime, squeaking across the windshield. He was thinking about sleep, about his bed, about the 4 hours he'd get before the alarm went off again. That's when he saw it. The wreckage. A luxury sedan wrapped around the guardrail. Steam rising from the crumpled hood, the driver's side crushed inward. The car had hit hard. Glass littered the road, catching the reflection of his headlights like scattered stars. Traffic was slowing, cars pulling into the far lane to pass, but no one was stopping. Elias didn't think. He just pulled onto the shoulder, his truck skidding slightly on the wet pavement. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and ran toward the wreck. The rain soaked through his jacket immediately. His boots splashed through puddles as he approached the car. The front end was destroyed, wrapped around the metal barrier at an angle that made his stomach turn. He could smell gasoline and hot metal. "Hello?" he called out. "Can you hear me?" A weak sound came from inside. A moan. Someone was alive. He moved to the driver's side window, shining his phone's light inside. A woman sat slumped against the deployed airbag, her head tilted to one side. Blood ran down her temple from a gash near her hairline. Her eyes were half open, unfocused. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Can you hear me? I'm going to help you." She turned her head slightly toward his voice. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The door was jammed, bent inward from the impact. He tried the handle, locked. He moved around to the passenger side. That door opened with a screech of metal. He leaned in carefully, assessing. The woman was breathing but shallow. Her face was pale, too pale. She wore an elegant dark coat, now torn and stained. On her wrist, he noticed a diamond bracelet catching the light, but he pushed the observation aside. That didn't matter right now. "Stay with me," he said, reaching across to touch her shoulder gently. "I'm calling for help." He dialed 911, wedging the phone between his shoulder and ear, while keeping one hand on her. The operator answered immediately. "There's been an accident on Highway 40 westbound, about 2 miles past the Morrison exit. Single vehicle wrapped around the guardrail. One occupant, female, conscious but disoriented. Head injury, possible internal injuries. She needs an ambulance immediately." The operator confirmed the location and told him help was on the way. He gave her more details. The severity of the damage, the woman's condition, the fact that he couldn't safely move her. The operator stayed on the line, walking him through what to do. He reached through the broken window and found her hand. Her fingers were cold. He wrapped his warm hand around hers. "Help is coming," he said. "You're going to be okay. I need you to stay awake. Can you do that for me?" Her eyes found his face. She blinked slowly. "That's good," he encouraged. "Keep looking at me." "What's your name?" Her lips moved. He leaned closer. "Celine," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the rain. "Celine. That's a beautiful name. I'm Elias. I'm staying right here with you until the ambulance arrives." "You're not alone." She squeezed his hand weakly. He squeezed back. "Do you remember what happened?" he asked, trying to keep her engaged. She closed her eyes. No, stay with me, Celine. Open your eyes." She did, but it took effort. "The rain," she murmured. "Couldn't see." "The car, it's okay. Don't worry about that now. Just focus on staying awake." Blood was still seeping from the wound on her head. He wished he had something to press against it, but he didn't want to leave her even for a moment to get something from his truck. Instead, he kept talking, kept her focused on his voice. "I have a daughter," he told her. "Her name is Lila. She's 12. She wants to be an architect. Draws buildings all day long." Celine's eyes flickered with something, recognition maybe, or just the effort to focus. "That's nice," she breathed. "She is nice. She's the best thing in my life." He paused. "Do you have family? Someone I should call?" She shook her head slightly, then winced at the movement. "Don't move," he said quickly. "Just rest. Keep your eyes on me." In the distance he heard sirens. Relief flooded through him. "You hear that? That's help coming." "You're going to be fine." "Thank you," she whispered. The words were soft but clear. Don't leave. I'm not going anywhere. I promise." The ambulance pulled up behind his truck, lights flashing red and blue across the rain-soaked highway. Paramedics rushed over with equipment, their movements efficient and practiced. Elias stepped back to give them room, but kept holding Celine's hand, until one of the medics gently took over. They worked quickly, stabilizing her neck, checking her vitals, asking her questions. She answered weakly but coherently enough. One paramedic looked at Elias. "You did good. Keeping her conscious probably saved her life." Elias nodded, his heart still pounding. He watched as they carefully extracted her from the vehicle, placing her on a stretcher. She turned her head, searching for him through the chaos. "Elias," she called out weakly. He stepped forward. "I'm here. Thank you." Her eyes held his for a moment, full of something he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. Connection, maybe. Recognition of a kindness that went beyond obligation. Then they loaded her into the ambulance and closed the doors. A police officer approached him, notepad in hand, asking for his account of what happened. Elias explained he'd seen the wreck, stopped to help, called 911. The officer took down his name and contact information, thanked him for his quick action. "You probably saved her life," the officer said, echoing the paramedic's words. Elias didn't know what to say to that. He'd just done what anyone should do. What anyone would do, except no one else had stopped. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing into the night. The tow truck arrived to deal with the wreckage. Elias stood there for a moment, rain still falling, watching the red taillights disappear down the highway. Then he got back in his truck and drove home. The apartment was quiet when he let himself in. Mrs. Kowalski had left a note saying Lila had finished her homework and gone to bed at 9. He checked on her, still asleep, peaceful, then went to his own room. He should have been exhausted. He was exhausted. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Celine's face, the fear in her eyes, the blood running down her temple, the way her cold hand had gripped his. He wondered if she'd be okay. The paramedics had seemed cautiously optimistic, but head injuries were serious. Internal bleeding, brain trauma. There were so many things that could go wrong. He hoped she had someone at the hospital. Family, friends, someone to sit with her. The thought of her being alone bothered him more than it should. He rolled over, punched his pillow, tried to settle. Tomorrow was Thursday. He had the morning shift at the warehouse, home by 4. Normal day, back to routine. This was just one of those things that happened in life. A moment of crisis, a stranger in need, help given. Nothing more? He'd probably never see her again. That's what he told himself as he finally drifted off to sleep. The rain still drumming against the window, the image of frightened eyes and a whispered thank you following him into dreams. 3 days passed. Elias went back to his routine. Warehouse in the morning, home with Lila in the afternoon, maintenance work on Wednesday night again. The accident faded into the background of his mind, becoming just another memory filed away with all the other moments that fill a life. But on Saturday afternoon, his phone rang. Unknown number, hello? Is this Elias Brenner? A woman's voice, professional, courteous. Yes, that's me. Mr. Brenner, this is Karen Sutherland from Memorial Hospital. I'm calling on behalf of a patient, Celine Ashworth. She'd very much like to speak with you if you have time to visit. He paused, caught off guard. Is she okay? She's recovering well. The doctors are very pleased with her progress. But she specifically asked if we could reach out to you. Would you be available to visit sometime this week? He thought about his schedule. Monday he had the warehouse. Tuesday too. But Tuesday afternoon he could make it work. He'd just need to skip the grocery run. Tuesday afternoon. Around 3? That would be perfect. I'll let her know. Ask for the private wing when you arrive, 7th floor. Private wing. That registered somewhere in the back of his mind, but he didn't dwell on it. When Tuesday came, he told Lila he had an errand to run after work. She was at a friend's house for a study group, so he didn't have to explain much. He changed out of his warehouse uniform into clean jeans and his better shirt, the navy one without any stains, and drove to the hospital. Memorial was the biggest hospital in the city, a sprawling complex of modern buildings and older wings. He'd been here before, 3 years ago, sitting in waiting rooms and walking sterile hallways while Sophia fought her losing battle. The smell hit him as soon as he walked in. Antiseptic and floor polish, and something underneath that was uniquely hospital. He took the elevator to the 7th floor. The doors opened onto a space that looked nothing like the rest of the hospital. Soft lighting, tasteful artwork on the walls, plush seating in the waiting area. A receptionist sat at a polished desk. "I'm here to see Celine Ashworth," he said. The receptionist smiled warmly. "You must be Mr. Brenner. She's been expecting you. Room 712, down the hall to your left." He followed the directions, his boots quiet on the carpeted floor. This didn't look like any hospital wing he'd seen before. The doors were farther apart, the space quieter, more private. He found 712 and knocked softly. "Come in," a voice called. He opened the door. The room was large, more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. There was a bed, yes, but also a sitting area with comfortable chairs. A large window with a view of the city, and fresh flowers on every surface, roses, lilies, arrangements that must have cost a fortune. Celine sat propped up in the bed, her head bandaged but her eyes alert. She looked better than she had 3 nights ago, color in her face, clarity in her gaze. She smiled when she saw him. "Elias, thank you for coming." He stepped inside, suddenly aware of how out of place he felt. How are you feeling? Much better, thanks to you. She gestured to one of the chairs near the bed. Please sit. He sat holding his jacket in his lap. I'm glad you're okay. You had me worried. The doctors tell me I'm very lucky. Concussion, 3 broken ribs, some internal bruising, but nothing that won't heal. She paused. They also told me that if you hadn't stopped, if you hadn't kept me conscious and calm, I might not have made it. The head injury, I was going into shock. Anyone would have done the same thing. But they didn't. Her voice was gentle but firm. Everyone else drove past. You stopped. You stayed with me. You held my hand in the rain. He didn't know what to say to that. I wanted to thank you properly, she continued, and to apologize for not getting your information before they took me away. I barely remember that night. It's all fragments. But I remember your voice. I remember feeling safe. Something in her tone, in the sincerity of her words, made his throat tight. You don't need to thank me, really. I do, though. She studied him for a moment. The hospital administrator told me a little about you. You work at a warehouse? And you have a daughter? Yes, Lila, she's 12. You mentioned her that night. I remember. You said she wants to be an architect. He was surprised she remembered. That's right. She's talented, too. Always drawing, always designing. Celine's expression softened. That's wonderful. Does she enjoy school? She loves it. She's smart, smarter than me, that's for sure. She's in all advanced classes, the conversation flowing more naturally than he expected. She asked about his work, about Lila's interests, about their life. He found himself being honest in a way he rarely was with people he'd just met. Maybe it was because she'd already seen him in a moment of crisis. Maybe it was the kindness in her eyes. She was elegant, he noticed. Even in a hospital gown with bandages on her head, there was something refined about her. The way she spoke, the way she held herself. This room too, the private wing, the expensive flowers. He began to realize she wasn't just comfortable. She was wealthy, but she didn't act like it. She listened to him talk about his warehouse job with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions about Lila's schooling, and never once made him feel less than. Can I ask you something? She said after a pause. Of course. What made you stop that night? Really? He considered the question. I saw someone who needed help. I couldn't just drive past, even though you were tired, even though it was raining, even though it would have been easier to let someone else handle it. It wouldn't have been easier, he said quietly. Not for me. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself. She nodded slowly, as if he'd confirmed something she already suspected. You're a good man, Elias. I'm just a regular person. That's what makes it remarkable. She reached for a glass of water on the bedside table, wincing slightly at the movement. He stood instinctively, helping her. She smiled her thanks. I'd like to stay in touch, if that's all right with you. I don't have many people in my life who... She paused, choosing her words carefully. I value authenticity. You were authentic that night. No pretense, no expectations. Just kindness. I'd like that, he said, and meant it. Before he left, she gave him her phone number. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And give my regards to Lila. He walked out of the hospital with a small white visitor badge still clipped to his shirt and a strange lightness in his chest. He wasn't sure what had just happened, only that something had shifted. He'd gone in expecting a brief thank you, and he'd left with, what? A new friend. That seemed too simple. On the drive home, he thought about the private wing, the expensive flowers, the way the staff had treated her with deference. She had money, a lot of it clearly, but she'd asked him about his life like it mattered. Like he mattered. When he got home, Lila was already back, making herself a snack in the kitchen. How was your errand? She asked. Good. Actually, I visited someone at the hospital. The woman from the accident. Lila's eyes widened. Really? Is she okay? She's recovering. She wanted to thank me. That's really nice. Lila bit into her apple. What's she like? Elias thought about it. Kind, thoughtful. I think you'd like her. Maybe I'll get to meet her sometime. Maybe, he said, though he wasn't sure that would ever happen. But 3 days later, his phone buzzed with a text message. Hi, Elias, it's Celine. They're releasing me from the hospital tomorrow. I was wondering if you'd like to meet for coffee sometime. I'd love to hear more about Lila's architecture dreams. See, he stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, "I'd like that. When works for you?" Her response came quickly. "Saturday afternoon. There's a quiet cafe on Elm Street near the park. Nothing fancy, nothing fancy." He appreciated that. "Saturday works. 2 o'clock? Perfect. See you then." He set his phone down and looked around their small apartment, at the second-hand furniture, the patch sofa, the drawings covering every wall. His life and her life were clearly very different. But she wanted to know him anyway. That meant something. He just wasn't sure what yet. Saturday came with clear skies and the kind of autumn warmth that made you forget winter was coming. Elias told Lila about the coffee meeting over breakfast. "Can I come?" she asked immediately. He hesitated. He'd assumed it would just be him and Celine. But then again, Celine had specifically mentioned wanting to hear about Lila's interests. "If you want to. But it might be boring, just two adults talking. Dad, she wanted to know about my architecture stuff. I should be there to tell her myself," he smiled. She had a point. "All right. Bring your sketchbook then. The one with your best designs." They walked to the cafe together. It was only 6 blocks from their apartment, a small place with outdoor seating and local artwork on the walls. Celine was already there, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea. She dressed simply, jeans, a soft grey sweater, her dark hair pulled back. The bandage on her head was smaller now, barely visible. She stood when she saw them approaching, her face lighting up. "Elias, and you must be Lila." Lila shook her hand politely. "It's nice to meet you, Miss Ashworth. Please, call me Celine." She gestured to the chairs. "I'm so glad you both could come. I took the liberty of ordering some pastries. I hope that's all right." The table had a plate of croissants and scones. Elias started to protest about the expense, then stopped himself. It was a kind gesture. "Accept it graciously, thank you," he said simply. They settled in and the conversation flowed naturally. Celine asked Lila about school, about her favorite subjects, about what kind of buildings she liked to design. Lila, who was usually shy around strangers, opened up completely. She pulled out her sketchbook and showed Celine her drawings. The community center, a library with floor-to-ceiling windows, a small house designed for sustainability. Celine studied each one carefully, asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested. "This rooftop garden here, how would you address the weight distribution?" "That's always a challenge with green roofs." Lila's eyes went wide. "You know about architecture?" "A little. I studied it briefly in college She paused. "Before I changed directions. What do you do now?" Lila asked. "I'm semi-retired. I do some consulting work, but mostly I just try to stay busy with things I care about." Elias noticed she didn't really answer the question, but Lila didn't seem to notice. She was too excited to be talking with someone who understood her passion. "There's a summer program I've heard about," Celine said casually. "At the State University. It's for students interested in architecture and engineering. 2 weeks of workshops, portfolio development, meeting professionals in the field. They offer scholarships for students who show promise." Lila looked at her father. "Could I?" Elias felt his chest tighten. Those programs usually have costs beyond the scholarship. Travel, materials, housing. "This one's different," Celine said gently. "It's fully funded for accepted students. Everything included. The application deadline isn't until January. So there's time to put together a strong portfolio." She looked at Lila. "With drawings like these, I think you'd have an excellent chance." Hope flickered across Lila's face, bright and painful to watch. Elias knew that hope. He'd felt it himself, countless times, only to have reality crush it. "We'll look into it," he said carefully. Celine seemed to understand his hesitation. She didn't push. Instead, she changed the subject, asking about their weekend plans, about the neighborhood, about ordinary things. But Elias could see Lila's mind working, could see her already imagining herself at that program. After they finished their coffee, Lila excused herself to look at the artwork on the cafe walls. Celine leaned forward slightly. "I hope I didn't overstep," she said quietly. "I just thought with her talent she should know what opportunities exist. No, it's kind of you. I just don't want her to get her hopes up if—" He struggled with the words. "Money's tight. Even if the program's free, there are always unexpected costs." And if she doesn't get in, she'll get in, Celine said with certainty. And if there are costs, we'll figure it out together. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Her voice was firm but warm. Elias, you saved my life. Let me do this small thing. It's not small. Then let me do this meaningful thing. He looked at her, at the sincerity in her eyes, and felt something shift inside him. Pride wanted him to refuse, but love for his daughter was stronger than pride. All right, he said. We'll apply. Thank you, she smiled. Good. Now I'll need her portfolio photographs for the application. Do you have a good camera, or should I? I have a phone. It takes decent pictures. Perfect. I'll send you the application link tonight. And Elias? She waited until he met her eyes. You're doing an amazing job with her. She's bright, polite, creative. That doesn't happen by accident. That's because of you. His throat felt tight again. I just try to be there for her. That's everything. Over the next few weeks, Celine became a regular presence in their lives. Not intrusive, never overwhelming, but there. She texted to check in, asked how the application was going, offered to review Lila's portfolio before submission. When Lila had questions about architectural concepts, Celine answered them thoughtfully or directed her to resources. And somewhere in there, she and Elias became friends, real friends. They'd meet for coffee while Lila was at school. They'd talk about everything, his work, her recovery, books they'd read, childhood memories. She told him about growing up feeling isolated, about never quite fitting into the world she was born into. He told her about Sophia, about the grief that still caught him off guard sometimes, about the fear that he wasn't enough for Lila. She never made him feel judged, never made him feel less than. The application was submitted in early January. Then came the waiting. Lila checked her email obsessively. Every day, nothing. Every day, her shoulders would slump a little more. These things take time, Elias reminded her. They have to review hundreds of applications, but he was checking his own email too, hoping. On a Thursday afternoon in late January, Lila burst through the door, her phone in her hand, tears streaming down her face. For a horrible moment, Elias thought something was wrong. Then she screamed, "I got in! Dad, I got in!" She threw herself into his arms, and he held her tight, feeling his own eyes sting. "Of course you did. Of course you did." The letter said she'd been accepted with a full scholarship. All expenses covered. 2 weeks in July at the State University, learning from architects and engineers, building her portfolio, preparing for her future. Elias called Celine immediately. "She got in," he said when she answered. "Lila got into the program." "Elias, that's wonderful. I knew she would." "Is she excited?" "Excited doesn't begin to cover it. She's..." His voice broke slightly. "Thank you for believing in her, for showing her this was possible. You don't need to thank me. She earned this," but he knew better. Yes, Lila had earned it with her talent and hard work, but Celine had opened the door. Without her, they wouldn't have even known the door existed. That night, after Lila had finally fallen asleep, still clutching the acceptance letter, Elias sat in the kitchen and let himself feel the weight of gratitude. For 3 years, since Sophia died, he'd been carrying everything alone. The grief, the responsibility, the constant worry about whether he was doing enough. And now, for the first time, someone was helping him carry it. Not out of obligation or pity, but because she cared. He thought about the night of the accident, about pulling over in the rain, about holding a stranger's hand and promising she wasn't alone. He'd done it because it was right, because he couldn't do anything else. But somehow, in saving her, maybe he'd saved something in himself too. Maybe he'd opened a door to something neither of them had expected. Connection, hope, the possibility that life could hold more than just survival. His phone buzzed. A text from Celine. "I'm proud of you both. Dinner next week to celebrate?" "My treat," he typed back. "You don't have to." Her response came immediately. "I want to, please." He smiled and sent, "Okay, thank you. For everything. Thank you for stopping that night. For being exactly who you are." He set his phone down and looked around the small apartment. Nothing had changed physically. The furniture was still second-hand. The walls still needed paint. The refrigerator still hummed too loud. But something had changed, something important. He couldn't name it yet, but he could feel it. Like a door opening, like light coming into a room that had been dark for too long. And for the first time in 3 years, he let himself believe that things might actually get better. Spring arrived slowly, bringing longer days and the kind of warmth that made everything feel possible. Lila counted down to summer and her program. Elias watched her excitement grow and felt grateful every single day for the turn their lives had taken. His friendship with Celine had settled into something comfortable and real. They met for coffee every week, sometimes twice. She'd text him articles she thought he'd find interesting, and he'd send her photos of Lila's latest designs. It was easy, natural, the kind of friendship he hadn't had since before Sophia got sick. But there were still things he didn't understand about her. She lived modestly. He knew that now. He'd picked her up a few times for their coffee meetings, seen the small apartment building she called home. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed wealth. Yet she moved through the world with a certain confidence, an ease that spoke of security he'd never known. And sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, he'd catch a sadness in her eyes, a loneliness. One evening in March, she invited him to dinner at her place. Lila was spending the night at a friend's house, so he accepted. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of an older building, the kind with good bones but no pretense. He climbed the stairs, the elevator was broken, and knocked on her door. She answered with a smile, wearing jeans and a simple blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Come in. I hope you're hungry." "I made too much food, as usual." The apartment was small but beautifully arranged. Clean lines, comfortable furniture, plants on every surface that actually looked healthy. Books lined one wall, mostly art and architecture, he noticed, but also philosophy, history, novels with worn spines that had been read multiple times. It felt like a home, not just a place to live. "This is nice," he said, "thank you." "It's not much, but it's mine." She gestured to the small dining table already set for 2. "Sit, I'll get the food." Dinner was simple: roasted chicken, vegetables, bread from a local bakery. They ate and talked about ordinary things at first. Layla's latest project, a problem with the forklift at work. The book Celine was reading. Then, as he was helping clear the dishes, he noticed a photograph tucked into the bookshelf, partially hidden, as if she didn't want to look at it, but couldn't bring herself to put it away completely. A large estate, manicured gardens, people in formal attire standing stiffly for the camera. "Is that—" He stopped himself. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't pry." She followed his gaze and went very still. For a moment he thought she'd change the subject. Instead, she took the photograph down and looked at it. "That's my family," she said quietly. "Or what's left of it. That was taken 12 years ago, at my father's 60th birthday. He could see her in the photo, younger, dressed in an expensive gown that didn't quite fit the expression on her face. She looked trapped. "You don't have to—" he started. "No, I want to tell you." She set the photo on the table and sat down. He sat across from her, waiting. "I need to tell you. Because you're my friend, and friends should be honest with each other." "All right." She took a breath. "I was born into money, a lot of it. My father built a financial empire, investments, real estate, acquisitions. The Ashworth name carries weight in certain circles. Growing up, we had everything money could buy. Private schools, tutors, travel connections. But we didn't have warmth. We didn't have—" She paused, searching for the word. "Joy." Elias listened, not interrupting. "My father was brilliant but cold. My mother died when I was young, and he remarried twice. Women who wanted the lifestyle, not the family. My siblings and I, we were raised by nannies and sent to boarding schools. We were assets to be managed, not children to be loved. That sounds lonely." It was. "I kept thinking that when I got older I'd understand it. I'd fit into that world. But I never did." She stood, moving to the window, looking out at the street below. "When I was 30, I walked away. Took a small portion of my trust fund, enough to live on comfortably but modestly, and disappeared. Changed my life. Started over." "What did your family say?" They didn't understand." My father was furious. He thought I was being ungrateful, throwing away everything he'd built. My siblings thought I was crazy. Who walks away from that kind of security, that kind of power? She turned to face him. But I couldn't breathe there, Elias. Every relationship was transactional. Every conversation was about business or status or maintaining appearances. I wanted something real. And did you find it? Sometimes, in small moments. But mostly, I've been alone. Because once people know who I am, where I come from, everything changes. They either want something from me or they're intimidated, or they see the money instead of me. Her voice softened. Until you, he felt the weight of what she was saying. I don't see you any differently. I know. That's why I'm telling you. She sat back down across from him. That night on the highway, you pulled over because someone needed help. Not because of who I was or what I could give you. You didn't even know my name. You just saw another human being in trouble. Anyone would have. We both know that's not true. Her smile was sad. And everything since then, you've accepted my friendship but never asked for anything. You were reluctant to even let me help with Lila's program. Do you know how rare that is? He didn't know what to say. The revelation that she was actually wealthy, seriously wealthy, was settling into his mind. He thought about the private hospital wing, the way she'd known exactly how to arrange Lila's scholarship, the ease with which she moved through the world. It all made sense now. How wealthy are we talking? He asked quietly. Billionaire territory. Or it would be if I'd stayed. I took enough to live comfortably, but I left the bulk of it behind. My siblings got most of it, and they're okay with that? They were. Until recently. Her expression darkened. My father died last year, and now there are complications. But that's not important right now. What's important is that you know the truth about who I am. He absorbed this, turning it over in his mind. You're still Celine, the woman who asks about my daughter and remembers what kind of coffee I like. The woman who listens when I talk about Sophia. That's who you are. The money, that's just circumstances. Relief washed over her face. You really mean that? I do, he paused. But I understand now why you live the way you do, why you're so private. You're protecting yourself. I'm protecting the life I built. The real one. She reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for being a friend, he finished. That's all. Just a friend who's grateful to know you. They sat there for a moment, hands clasped across the table, and something shifted between them. Not the friendship that remained solid, but the depth of it. The trust. She'd shown him who she really was, all of it, and he hadn't flinched. Later, as he was leaving, she handed him a small brass key. What's this? Spare key to my apartment, she said. In case you ever need anything. In case Lila ever needs anything. I trust you, Elias, completely. He closed his hand around the key, feeling its weight. I trust you too. Walking home that night, he thought about trust and friendship and the strange paths life takes. 6 months ago, he'd been alone, struggling, carrying everything by himself. Now he had someone who saw him, really saw him, and chose to be in his life anyway. Not because of what he could give her, but because of who he was. The key felt warm in his pocket, a small piece of metal that somehow meant everything. When he got home, he added it to his key ring, right next to the key to his own apartment, where it belonged. 3 months passed in a rhythm of work and routine and the steady presence of friendship. Elias's life had transformed in small but significant ways. The constant anxiety about money had eased, not disappeared but softened. Lila was thriving, her confidence growing as her summer program approached, and Celine had become woven into the fabric of their days, as natural as breathing. She came to Lila's school art show in May. She helped Elias shop for a new refrigerator when his finally died, insisting on splitting the cost despite his protests. She was there, steady and reliable, in a way that made him realize how long he'd been without that kind of support. But he noticed things too. The way she sometimes grew distant, checking her phone with a furrowed brow. The calls she'd step away to take, returning with tension in her shoulders. Something was bothering her, but she kept it to herself, until one evening in June, he was at her apartment, helping her organize some boxes of books she wanted to donate. Lila was at her program orientation meeting. They worked in comfortable silence, sorting through volumes, when Celine's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her whole body tensed. "I need to take this," she said. "I'm sorry." She went into her bedroom and closed the door. He couldn't hear the words, but he could hear the tone, sharp, defensive, upset. The conversation went on for 10 minutes. When she emerged, her face was pale. "Everything okay?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, not really." She sat down heavily on the couch. "That was my brother, Philip." Elias sat beside her. "What did he want?" "To inform me that he and my sister are challenging my trust fund status. They're claiming I'm not mentally competent to manage my own affairs. Her voice caught. That I've shown erratic behavior and poor judgment by isolating myself and making questionable financial decisions. That's ridiculous. They have lawyers. Good ones, and they have evidence, or what they're calling evidence. Photos of this apartment showing I live below my means. Records of money I've given away, including the scholarship arrangement for Lila's program. They're painting it as instability, as someone who's lost touch with reality. Elias felt anger rise in his chest. They can't do that. You haven't done anything wrong. In their world, choosing to live simply when you could live lavishly is wrong. Walking away from the family business is wrong. Having friends they don't approve of is wrong. She looked at him, and he saw fear in her eyes. "My father died 8 months ago. I hoped that would be the end of it. That they'd leave me alone. But apparently they've been building this case since then. They want control of my share of the inheritance. How much are we talking about? Enough that it's worth fighting for. Several $100 million. The number was so large it barely registered. He couldn't conceptualize that kind of money. Can they actually succeed?" he asked. "I don't know. My lawyer says we have a strong case. I've been stable, responsible, living independently. But my siblings will argue that my choices themselves are evidence of instability, that a rational person wouldn't give up wealth and status and family connections." She stood, pacing. "The hearing is in 6 weeks. I have to go back to the estate, face them, defend my entire life. I'm coming with you," he said immediately. She turned to him. "What?" "I'm coming with you. If they want to question your judgment, they can hear from someone who knows the truth. Someone who's seen how thoughtful and kind and sane you are. Elias, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You stood by me. You helped my daughter. You've been there for us when no one else was. Now I'm standing by you." Tears welled in her eyes. "It won't be easy. They'll be cruel. They'll try to dismiss you, make you feel small. Let them try." He stood and crossed to her. "I'm not afraid of your family. I'm not afraid of their money or their lawyers or their judgment. I know who you are. And I'll tell anyone who asks." She hugged him then, tight and desperate. He held her, feeling her shoulders shake with silent sobs. When she pulled back, she wiped her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." "You pulled over when I needed you," he said softly. "Now I'm pulling over for you." Over the next few weeks they prepared. Celine's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Whitmore, briefed them on what to expect. The hearing would be formal, adversarial. Philip and Vanessa would present their case first, arguing that Celine had shown a pattern of poor judgment. Then Celine would defend herself, and Elias would testify as a character witness. "They'll go after you," Patricia warned him. "They'll try to paint you as someone taking advantage of her, or as evidence that she's surrounding herself with inappropriate people." "I can handle it," Elias said. Lila noticed the tension. One night at dinner she asked, "Dad, is something wrong with Celine?" He'd been trying to shield her from it, but she was too perceptive. "She's having some family trouble. Legal stuff with her siblings. Is she going to be okay?" "I hope so. I'm going to help her." "Good." Lila nodded firmly. "She helped us. We help her. That's what friends do." Out of the mouths of 12-year-olds came the clearest truth. The night before they were set to leave for the hearing, Elias couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he'd say, how he'd defend her against people who'd known her whole life. What could he possibly offer that would counter their narrative? His phone buzzed. A text from Celine. "Can't sleep either," he called her. She answered on the first ring. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've been trying to be strong, but I'm terrified. What if they win? What if I lose everything I've built?" "Then you rebuild," he said. "You did it once before. You can do it again. I don't want to go back to that life. I can't. You won't have to. We won't let them take who you are. There was a pause. Then why are you doing this? Really, because you're my friend. Because you matter to me. Because what they're doing is wrong. He paused. And because you showed me that it's okay to accept help. You taught me that. Now let me teach you the same thing. He heard her breath catch. Elias, we're going to face them together, he said. And whatever happens, you're not alone. You understand. You're not alone. I understand. Her voice was steadier now. Thank you. For everything. Get some sleep. We have a long drive tomorrow. You too. Good night, Elias. Good night, Celine. He hung up and lay back down, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow they'd leave for the estate, for the world she'd escaped. He'd meet the family that had never valued her, never seen her for who she really was, and he'd show them exactly what they'd missed. He thought about the photograph she'd shown him, the stiff, formal gathering, the people who looked through each other instead of at each other. That wasn't family. That was performance. Real family was what he and Lila had built. What he and Celine had built. It wasn't about blood or money or status. It was about showing up, about holding someone's hand when they were scared, about pulling over when everyone else drove past. He finally fell asleep near dawn, his alarm set for 6. They had a 4-hour drive ahead of them, and then a battle to fight, but he wasn't afraid, because he'd spent his whole life fighting for what mattered. And Celine mattered. They left at dawn, Elias's truck loaded with overnight bags and the folder of documents Patricia had prepared. Celine was quiet in the passenger seat, watching the city give way to suburbs, then farmland, and then the rolling hills that led to her family's estate. I haven't been back in 7 years, she said, as they crossed into the county. Not since I left for good. What was it like growing up there? Beautiful, in a cold sort of way. Everything perfectly maintained, perfectly arranged. Like a museum, we weren't allowed to run in the house or raise our voices or be children, really. We had to be little adults, always on display. She gazed out the window. There's a garden in the back that I loved, though. My mother planted it before she died. Roses and lavender. My father kept it maintained after she was gone. The only sentimental thing he ever did. The estate appeared after they turned off the main highway onto a private road. Elias had seen wealth before, nice neighborhoods, expensive cars, but this was different. This was generational money, the kind that bought land and legacy. The house was massive, a Georgian-style mansion with columns and wings spreading out on either side. Manicured lawns stretched in every direction. A fountain stood in the circular drive. It looked like something from a movie, not a place where real people actually lived. "This is where you grew up?" he asked. "This is where I survived," she corrected quietly. They parked and walked to the front entrance. Before Celine could knock, the door opened. A man in his 50s stood there, tall, thin, with sharp features and cold eyes. He wore an expensive suit despite it being a Saturday morning. "Celine." His voice was clipped, formal. "You're early." "Hello, Philip." Her brother's gaze shifted to Elias, looking him up and down with barely concealed disdain. "And this is?" "Elias Brenner, a friend." "I see." Philip stepped aside. "The lawyers are setting up in the library. We'll begin in an hour." The interior was exactly as Elias had imagined. Marble floors, oil paintings, antique furniture that probably cost more than his annual salary. Everything perfect, everything cold. A woman descended the curved staircase, younger than Philip, probably early 40s, blonde and polished. She stopped when she saw them. "Vanessa," Celine said, "you actually came." Vanessa's tone was surprised. "I thought you might run again." "I'm not running from anything," Celine said evenly. "I'm here to defend what's mine." "What's yours?" Vanessa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You walked away, Celine. You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with this family or father's legacy. Now that he's gone, suddenly you care about the inheritance?" "I care about my independence." "There's a difference." Philip cleared his throat. "Let's save this for the hearing, shall we?" "Patricia is already here, Celine. She's waiting for you. Your friend can wait in the sitting room." He said friend, like it was a dirty word. Elias followed Celine down a hallway to a smaller room. though still larger than his entire apartment. She turned to him before going to meet with her lawyer. "Thank you for being here," she said softly. "I know this is—" "I'm fine. Go. Do what you need to do." She squeezed his hand and left. He sat in one of the ornate chairs and waited, looking around at the wealth on display. Crystal decanters on a side table, a Persian rug that probably cost more than his truck, paintings that might be originals. This was her world, or had been. He tried to imagine young Celine here, growing up surrounded by all this, but feeling empty inside. It made sense now, her small apartment, her simple clothes, the way she valued genuine connection over everything else. She'd had everything money could buy and discovered it wasn't what she needed. An hour later, Philip came to get him. "The hearing is beginning. You'll be called to testify later. You can observe from the back." The library was enormous, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a conference table that could seat 20. At one end sat Philip and Vanessa with their lawyer, a severe man in his 60s. At the other end sat Celine and Patricia. A mediator, an older woman with grey hair and sharp eyes, sat at the head of the table. Elias took a seat in one of the chairs along the wall. The mediator called the hearing to order. "We're here to address the petition filed by Philip Ashworth and Vanessa Ashworth-Kent, challenging the mental competency and financial judgment of Celine Marie Ashworth. Mr. Ashworth, you may begin." What followed was brutal. Philip presented his case methodically. He showed photographs of Celine's modest apartment, contrasting it with the estate. He presented financial records showing large sums of money given to charitable causes and individuals, including the scholarship for Lila's program. He called witnesses, former family friends, who testified that Celine had always been difficult, ungrateful, unable to appreciate what she had. Then Vanessa testified. "Our father was dying," she said, her voice catching with what might have been genuine emotion. "He asked for all of us to come home. Philip came, I came, but Celine refused. She said she'd moved on from this family. She chose strangers over her own father in his final days." Celine's face had gone pale, but she didn't speak. "After he died," Vanessa continued, "we discovered she'd been living like this for years, giving money away to random people, refusing to engage with the family business, isolating herself in that apartment. This isn't grief or eccentricity. This is someone who's lost perspective, who's making decisions that no rational person would make." Their lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we're not claiming Miss Ashworth is incapable of basic function. We're saying she's shown a pattern of judgment so poor, so divorced from reality, that she cannot be trusted to manage substantial assets. She's given hundreds of thousands of dollars to strangers. She lives in poverty when she could live in comfort. She rejected her family and every opportunity they offered." He placed a document on the table. "This is a legal clause from the family trust, written by her father. It states that any heir showing persistent poor judgment and rejection of family values can have their inheritance placed in a managed trust for their own protection." Elias felt his stomach drop. This wasn't just about challenging her choices. They had legal grounds, however twisted, to take control. The mediator looked at the document carefully. "Ms. Whitmore, how does your client respond?" Patricia stood. "Your Honor, my client has committed no crime. She has harmed no one. She has simply chosen to live according to her own values, rather than her family's expectations. That is not poor judgment. That is autonomy. Autonomy that results in giving away money to strangers." Philip's lawyer countered. "Including a warehouse worker and his daughter? What's the nature of that relationship exactly?" All eyes turned to Elias. He felt his face flush. "That's enough," Patricia said sharply. "Mr. Brenner is here as a character witness, and his relationship with Ms. Ashworth is entirely appropriate." "Is it?" The lawyer pulled out another document. Photos from the hospital, from the cafe, from outside Celine's apartment. "They meet regularly. He has a key to her apartment. She's given his daughter money and opportunities. Obsessive attachment to a stranger who helped her after an accident. How is that not evidence of poor judgment?" Celine stood abruptly. "He's not a stranger. He's my friend. One of the few real friends I've ever had." "Sit down, Celine," Patricia said quietly. But Celine didn't sit. You want to talk about judgment? Let's talk about yours, Philip. You spent father's last 5 years trying to convince him to cut me out entirely because I embarrassed you. You, Vanessa, who married for money and divorced for more money. You want to judge my choices? Your Honor, Philip's lawyer interjected, this outburst demonstrates exactly what we're talking about. Emotional instability, inability to conduct herself appropriately. I'll conduct myself however I want. Celine's voice rose. This is my life, my money, my choice. Patricia put a hand on her shoulder. Celine, please. You're not helping. Celine sat down, but Elias could see her shaking. The mediator called for a recess. Everyone filed out except Celine and Patricia, who spoke in low, urgent tones. Elias stayed in his seat, processing what he'd just witnessed. This was worse than he'd thought. They weren't just questioning her choices. They were trying to paint her as unstable, irrational. And by helping him and Lila, she'd given them ammunition. He felt sick. She'd been so generous, so kind. And now that kindness was being used against her, Philip appeared beside him. You should leave. Elias looked up. Excuse me? This doesn't concern you. You're out of your depth here. Go home to your warehouse job and your little apartment and stop dragging my sister down with you. Elias stood slowly. I'm not dragging her anywhere. She chose her life. She chose her friends. And there's nothing wrong with either. She gave you money, Philip said coldly. That's what this is about, isn't it? You saw an opportunity and you took it. I never asked her for anything. You didn't have to. People like you never do. You just wait for people like her to feel sorry for you. That's enough. Celine's voice cut across the room. She'd come back in, Patricia beside her. Elias is here because I asked him to be. Because he actually cares about me, not my money. Because he sees me as a person, not an asset to be managed. Philip's jaw tightened. We're trying to protect you. You're trying to control me. There's a difference. The mediator called them back. The hearing resumed, and as Elias watched, as he saw the way Philip and Vanessa manipulated and twisted every choice Celine had made, he understood something fundamental. This wasn't about money or judgment or family values. This was about power. About refusing to let someone break free and live on their own terms, and he'd be damned if he let them win. The afternoon session was more of the same. Philip and Vanessa's lawyer methodically built their case, each piece of evidence designed to paint Celine as someone who'd lost her way. They brought in more witnesses, business associates of their father who testified that Celine had always been troubled, resistant to guidance, disconnected from reality. Elias watched Celine grow smaller in her chair with each testimony. This was exactly what they wanted, to break her down, make her doubt herself, prove she couldn't handle the pressure of defending her own choices. When the session finally adjourned for the day, Patricia pulled them aside in a small office. We need to recalibrate, she said. They're presenting a stronger case than I anticipated. That trust clause your father wrote, it's vague enough that they might actually have grounds. We need to show not just that you're competent, but that your choices have been consistently rational, purposeful, and beneficial. How do we do that? Celine's voice was strained. Tomorrow you testify. You tell your story your way. Then we call Mr. Brenner as a character witness. Patricia looked at Elias. Are you ready for this? They're going to come at you hard. I'm ready. They'll try to make you look like you're taking advantage of her. They'll question your motives, your relationship, everything. You need to stay calm, stay honest, and make them see what we see, that your friendship with Celine is genuine and that her judgment in trusting you was sound. Elias nodded. I understand. After Patricia left to review documents, Celine and Elias walked outside. The sun was setting over the estate's grounds, casting long shadows across the perfect lawns. She led him to the garden she'd mentioned, roses and lavender just as she'd described, maintained but somehow feeling abandoned. My mother planted these, she said, touching a rose bloom gently. She died when I was 8. I used to come here and talk to her. It was the only place that felt... She stopped, her voice breaking. He put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose to be here. They're going to tear you apart tomorrow. Say terrible things, make you wish you'd never met me. That's not possible. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I thought I'd escaped this. I thought if I just walked away, lived quietly, they'd leave me alone. But they can't stand it. They can't stand that I chose something different, that I found happiness without them. Did you find happiness? She wiped her eyes. I found peace. I found purpose. I found real friendship with you and Lila. That's more than I ever had in this house. They stood in the garden as the light faded. Two people who'd found each other by accident and become something more. Not romantic, it had never been that, but deeper somehow. Chosen family. The kind that mattered. We should go in, she said finally. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. They were staying in the guest house, a smaller building separate from the main mansion. 2 bedrooms, a shared living area. Still more luxurious than anywhere Elias had ever slept, but at least it was away from Philip and Vanessa. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept going over what he'd say tomorrow, how he'd defend her against people who'd known her whole life. Around midnight, he heard movement in the living area. He found Celine sitting on the couch, a photo album open on her lap. Can't sleep either, he asked. She looked up, just looking at old memories, trying to remember if there were good times here. There must have been, right? He sat beside her. The album was full of formal photographs, birthdays, holidays, achievements. But in every photo the same thing struck him. No one was touching. No hugs, no hands on shoulders, no physical affection at all. Just people standing near each other, performing family. You deserved better than this, he said quietly. We don't always get what we deserve. We get what we get, and we make the best of it. He thought about his own childhood, not wealthy, but warm. Parents who hugged him, who laughed, who showed up to his school events. He'd thought he understood loss when Sophia died. But Celine had been losing things her whole life. Connection, warmth, the basic sense of being valued for who you were. My daughter asked me something once, he said. A few months after Sophia died, she asked if our family was broken now that it was just the 2 of us. And I told her that family isn't about how many people you have. It's about how much they care. Celine closed the album. What made you think of that? Because you have family. Me and Lila, we're your family. Not because of blood or obligation, but because we care. Because you matter to us. Her eyes filled again. Elias, tomorrow when I testify, I'm not just defending your judgment. I'm telling the truth, that you're one of the best people I've ever known. That helping us wasn't poor judgment, it was kindness. And that's something they'll never understand, because they've never known what it means to give without expecting something back. She took his hand. Thank you for being here. For understanding. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we show them who you really are. Morning came too quickly. Elias dressed carefully in the one good shirt he'd brought, the navy one. He looked at himself in the mirror and thought about the old uniform hanging in his closet at home. His navy uniform from 20 years ago. He'd been young then, idealistic, ready to serve something bigger than himself. He'd learned about courage, about standing your ground even when you were afraid. That courage had never left him. It had just been waiting for a moment like this. They walked to the main house together. Philip and Vanessa were already in the library with their lawyers. The mediator took her place at the head of the table. Miss Ashworth, she said, you may present your defense. Patricia stood. Your Honor, we'll begin with Miss Ashworth's testimony, followed by character witnesses that demonstrate her sound judgment and stable life. Celine took the stand, not literally, but sitting at the table facing the mediator. She looked small, vulnerable, but when she began speaking, her voice was steady. I'd like to address the claims that have been made about my mental state and my judgment, she began. First, regarding my choice to live modestly. I chose this life deliberately. I grew up in wealth, in excess, in a world where everything was about status and appearance. I was miserable. I felt like I was suffocating. So yes, I walked away. I took enough money to live comfortably but simply, and I built a life based on meaning rather than accumulation. Philip's lawyer started to interrupt, but the mediator held up a hand. Let her speak. Second, regarding the charitable giving and help I've extended to others, including to Elias Brenner and his daughter. That wasn't erratic behavior. That was purpose. For the first time in my life, I was using resources to actually help people, not just maintain appearances or build dynasties. I helped a young girl pursue her dreams because she deserved the opportunity. I helped a man who'd saved my life because he'd never asked for anything in return. She looked directly at Philip and Vanessa. You say I've rejected family values, but what values? The value of putting money above people, the value of control over connection, the value of appearances over authenticity. If that's what family means to you, then yes, I've rejected it. But I don't think those are values worth having. Vanessa's face had gone red. Philip sat stone-faced. I'm not unstable, Celine continued. I'm not incompetent. I'm not making poor choices. I'm making different choices. And according to the law, according to basic human rights, I'm allowed to do that. This trust fund is mine. My father left it to me, and I've used it responsibly, just not in the way you think I should. Patricia introduced evidence to support Celine's claims, tax records showing charitable donations to legitimate organizations, bank statements showing consistent budgeting and savings, letters from community members where she volunteered. Everything painted a picture of someone thoughtful, deliberate, and stable. Then it was time for the character witnesses. We call Elias Brenner to testify. Elias stood and walked to the seat facing the mediator. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. He'd faced worse than this. He'd held dying people in his arms. He'd buried his wife. He'd raised a daughter alone. He could do this. Patricia began with gentle questions. How they met, how their friendship developed, what he'd observed about Celine's character and judgment. He answered honestly, describing the accident, her recovery, the way she'd shown genuine interest in his life and his daughter. He talked about her thoughtfulness, her consistency, her clear sense of purpose. Has she ever asked you for anything in return for her help? Patricia asked. No, never. She gave because she wanted to help, not because she expected anything back. And in your observation, would you say her choices regarding your friendship and helping your daughter showed poor judgment? No, they showed compassion. They showed someone who understands what really matters in life. Then came the cross-examination. Philip's lawyer stood, his expression cold. Mr. Brenner, what do you do for a living? I work at a warehouse. I operate a forklift. And what's your annual income? Patricia objected. Relevance? I'm establishing the disparity between my client and the witness, which speaks to the nature of their relationship. The mediator allowed it. About $38,000 a year, Elias said, plus some from a second job. So you're a working-class man, struggling to make ends meet, raising a daughter alone. And then you meet a wealthy woman. Quite fortunate timing, wouldn't you say? I didn't know she was wealthy when I met her. I just knew she needed help, but you know now. And yet you continue to accept her generosity, scholarships for your daughter, job connections, financial support. The scholarship was merit-based. My daughter earned it. A scholarship Ms. Ashworth arranged and funded. Let's not pretend otherwise. The lawyer circled closer. Isn't it true that you've benefited financially from this relationship? I've benefited from having a friend who believes in my daughter's future. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty. A friend who gives you money and opportunities you could never achieve on your own. Some might call that taking advantage of someone vulnerable. Elias felt anger rise, but kept his voice level. The only people taking advantage of Celine are the ones trying to control her in this room right now. The lawyer's eyes narrowed. You have strong feelings about Miss Ashworth. I care about my friend, yes. Enough to lie for her? I'm not lying. Everything I've said is the truth as you see it. From your perspective, Miss Ashworth is generous and kind. But isn't it possible you lack the judgment to assess whether her actions are actually appropriate? You're not a mental health professional. You're not a financial advisor. You're a warehouse worker who met a wealthy woman and has been receiving benefits ever since. Objection, Patricia stood. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, the mediator said. Move on. But the damage was done. The lawyer had planted the seed that Elias was either complicit in Celine's instability or too unsophisticated to recognize it. "No further questions," the lawyer said. Sitting down with a satisfied expression, Elias returned to his seat, his jaw clenched. Celine reached over and squeezed his hand. "You did well," she whispered, but he wasn't sure that was true. He'd defended her, yes, but had he helped or hurt her case? The mediator looked at her notes. "We'll adjourn until tomorrow morning, at which time I'll hear closing arguments. Thank you all." As they filed out, Philip blocked Celine's path. "This is pointless," he said quietly. "You know you're going to lose. Save yourself the humiliation and settle. Give up control of the trust, take an allowance, and we'll all move on." "Never," Celine said. "Then you'll have nothing. And your warehouse worker friend will disappear as soon as the money does." Elias stepped forward. "You don't know anything about me or what matters to me." Philip's smile was cruel. "I know exactly what you are. I've seen 100 like you. People who attach themselves to wealth and pretend it's about something else." "That's enough," Patricia intervened. "Let's go." They left the estate and returned to the guest house. Celine was shaking. "He's wrong," Elias said firmly. "You know he's wrong, do I?" She looked at him with desperate eyes. "What if they're right? What if I have been irrational? What if helping you and Lila was just me trying to fill some void, and I've ruined everything?" "Stop." He took her shoulders gently. "Listen to me. You didn't ruin anything. You changed lives. You gave a 12-year-old girl hope for her future. You showed a tired single father that the world isn't just struggle and loss. That's not irrational. That's human." She collapsed into him, sobbing. He held her while she cried out all the fear and doubt and pain of the last 2 days. "I don't want to lose this," she whispered against his shoulder. "Not the money, I don't care about that. But my freedom, my life, the ability to make my own choices. I can't go back to being who they want me to be." "You won't," he promised. "Tomorrow we finish this. And whatever happens, we face it together." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I need to write something for tomorrow, something they need to hear." She spent the rest of the evening at the small desk, writing and rewriting something by hand. Elias sat nearby, offering support but not interfering. This was her battle to fight, her words to speak. Around midnight she finally set down the pen. "It's done," she said. "What is it?" "The truth, all of it. Everything I should have said to them years ago." She folded the pages carefully. "Tomorrow they're going to hear it whether they want to or not." They went to their separate rooms, knowing tomorrow would decide everything. Elias lay in the unfamiliar bed, thinking about courage and truth, and what it meant to stand by someone when the world was against them. He thought about his old uniform, about the oath he'd taken to protect and serve. He wasn't in the Navy anymore, hadn't been for 20 years, but that oath had never really ended. It had just changed form. Now he was protecting something different, someone different, and he'd do it with everything he had. The final morning arrived with grey skies and the promise of rain. Elias and Celine walked to the main house in silence, both carrying the weight of what was to come. Inside the library, everyone had already assembled. Philip and Vanessa looking confident, their lawyer reviewing notes, Patricia sitting with calm determination. The mediator called the session to order. "We'll begin with closing arguments, then I'll render my decision. Mr. Caldwell, you may proceed." Philip's lawyer stood, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. The Ashworth Family Trust was established to preserve and grow wealth across generations. It includes protective measures for heirs who demonstrate they cannot responsibly manage significant assets. Ms. Ashworth has shown a clear pattern of behavior that meets these criteria." He walked to a display board, covered with photographs and financial records. She abandoned a lucrative position in the family business. She chose to live in poverty when she could live comfortably. She's given away hundreds of thousands of dollars to strangers, including this man and his daughter. He gestured toward Elias dismissively. She refused to visit her dying father. She's isolated herself from family support systems. These are not the actions of someone capable of managing $300 million. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Playing the concerned sister, We're not asking to take everything from her, the lawyer continued. We're asking for a conservatorship, a managed trust that ensures she's provided for while protecting assets she cannot properly steward. This is about protection, not punishment. About ensuring the Ashworth legacy continues as intended. He sat down. Philip gave a slight nod, satisfied. Patricia stood, her expression sharp. Your Honor, what we've just heard is an attempt to weaponize autonomy. Yes, Ms. Ashworth made choices her family disapproved of, but disapproval is not evidence of incompetence. She didn't abandon a business, she chose a different path. She didn't live in poverty, she lived within her means by choice. She didn't give money to strangers, she helped people who needed it. Patricia placed her own documents on the table. Let's examine actual evidence of competence. Ms. Ashworth has maintained stable housing for 7 years. She's paid all bills on time. She's made strategic charitable donations to verified organizations. She's maintained employment as a consultant. She has no debt, no history of substance abuse, no criminal record. By every legal and medical standard, she is fully competent. She paused, letting that sink in. The real issue here isn't Ms. Ashworth's competence. It's her family's inability to control her. They want to punish her for living differently, for valuing people over profit, for finding happiness outside their expectations. But that's not a legal basis for conservatorship. That's just disapproval dressed up as concern. Patricia returned to her seat. Elias could see Philip's jaw clench. The mediator looked at Celine. Ms. Ashworth, you have the right to make a final statement before I deliberate. Celine stood, holding the pages she'd written the night before. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was clear. Your Honor, I'd like to read something I wrote. Not legal arguments, just the truth about my life and my choices. The mediator nodded. Proceed. Celine unfolded the pages. I was 8 years old when my mother died. I remember my father telling me to stop crying at the funeral because people were watching. I remember my brother, he was 14, being told he needed to man up and focus on learning the business. I remember my sister being sent to boarding school 2 weeks later because the nannies couldn't handle her grief. Her voice wavered, but held. We were taught that feelings were weaknesses, that appearances mattered more than truth, that success meant accumulating more, controlling more, being more than everyone else. And for years, I tried. I tried so hard to be the daughter they wanted, the Ashworth they could be proud of. Philip shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But I was dying inside. Every business meeting felt like suffocation. Every society event felt like a performance. Every conversation was about strategy and status and who had more. I looked around at my life, at the mansion, the money, the power, and realized I had everything except the one thing that mattered. I didn't know who I was underneath all of it. She looked directly at her siblings. So I left. Not because I was ungrateful or unstable or confused. Because I needed to find out if there was a version of me that could be happy, that could be real. And what I discovered was that happiness isn't about how much you have. It's about connection. It's about purpose. It's about helping someone not because it benefits you, but because it's right. She glanced at Ilias. It's about a man who pulls over in the rain because someone needs help. Who stays even though he's tired, even though he has his own problems, even though there's nothing in it for him. That's humanity. That's what I was missing my whole life. Vanessa looked away. You say I have poor judgment because I helped Elias and his daughter. But that was the best judgment I've ever shown. Lila is brilliant, truly gifted. She deserved a chance that circumstances had denied her. Giving her that chance wasn't irrational. It was the most rational thing I've ever done. Because it was about potential, not profit. She set the pages down, speaking from her heart now. I didn't refuse to see my father because I was cruel. I refused because he wanted me to come back on his terms, to apologize for leaving, to promise I'd return to the family business, to admit I'd been wrong. And I wasn't wrong. Leaving saved my life. Her voice broke slightly. I loved him. Despite everything, I loved him. But I couldn't sacrifice myself to make him comfortable. I couldn't go back to being the daughter who performed happiness while feeling nothing inside. She turned to the mediator. Your Honor, my siblings say they're protecting me. But what they're really protecting is their idea of what an Ashworth should be. They can't accept that I found a different way to live, a better way for me. And they're using the legal system to punish me for it. I'm not incompetent. I'm not irrational. I'm just different from them. And in this country, that should be enough. Being different shouldn't cost me my freedom or my right to control my own life. She took a shaky breath. If you rule against me, if you give them control of my trust, you're not protecting me. You're telling every person in this country that if your family disapproves of your choices, they can take away your autonomy. You're saying that conforming matters more than living authentically. And that's not justice. That's control. She sat down, tears streaming down her face, but her head held high. The room was silent. Even Philip looked shaken. Vanessa was crying quietly. The mediator cleared her throat. "Thank you, Ms. Ashworth. That was—" She paused. "That was very honest. I'll need some time to review everything before making my decision. We'll reconvene in 1 hour." Everyone filed out. Elias found Celine in the hallway, leaning against the wall, emotionally exhausted. "You were incredible," he said. "I don't know if it was enough. It was the truth. That has to count for something." Patricia joined them. "That was powerful, Celine. Really powerful. You gave the mediator a lot to think about. What are our chances?" Celine asked. Patricia hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. Legally, they have a case. But morally, ethically, you destroyed their argument. It comes down to whether the mediator rules based on the letter of the law or the spirit of it." They waited in a small sitting room. Each minute felt like an hour. Elias watched Celine pace, her arms wrapped around herself, and wished there was something more he could do. Finally, a clerk appeared. "The mediator is ready." They returned to the library. Everyone took their places. The mediator had papers spread before her, her expression unreadable. "I've reviewed all testimony, evidence, and arguments," she began. "This is an unusual case, not because the legal questions are complex, they're actually quite straightforward, but because it forces us to examine what we mean by competence and what rights we're willing to protect." She looked at Philip and Vanessa. "The petitioners have presented evidence that Ms. Ashworth lives differently than her family expects, that she's made choices they wouldn't make, that she's distributed funds in ways they wouldn't approve. But living differently is not evidence of incompetence." Hope flickered in Elias's chest. "However," the mediator continued, "the trust document does contain language about rejection of family values as potential grounds for managed oversight. And Ms. Ashworth has, by her own admission, rejected those values." The hope dimmed. "The question before me is whether choosing different values constitutes the kind of impairment that justifies removing someone's autonomy. And after hearing everything, I believe it does not." Celine gasped softly. "Ms. Ashworth has demonstrated consistent decision-making, financial responsibility, and clear reasoning about her choices. She can articulate why she lives as she does. She can defend her decisions rationally. She has harmed no one. In fact, she's helped several people significantly. The fact that her family disapproves is not sufficient grounds for conservatorship." Philip stood. "Your Honor, the trust language specifically—" "I'm aware of what it says, Mr. Ashworth, and I'm interpreting it narrowly, as the law requires. Your father may have intended it as a means of control, but I won't allow it to be used that way. Ms. Ashworth retains full control of her trust fund and all associated assets." "The petition is denied." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the room. "Denied." Celine's legs gave out. Elias caught her, holding her as she sobbed with relief. Patricia was smiling broadly, gathering her papers with satisfaction. Philip's face had gone purple with rage. "This is absurd. You're allowing a clearly disturbed woman to—" "Mr. Ashworth," the mediator interrupted coldly, "my decision is final. If you wish to appeal, that's your right. But I suggest you examine whether your concerns are really about your sister's welfare or your own disappointment that she chose a life you can't control. This hearing is concluded." She stood and left. Philip stormed out behind her, Vanessa hurrying after him. "We won," Celine whispered against Elias's shoulder. "We actually won. You won, he corrected gently. You stood up for yourself. You told the truth. That's what won. Patricia joined them. Congratulations, Celine. You were very brave in there. Could they appeal? Celine asked, pulling back to wipe her eyes. They could, but they won't win. The mediator's reasoning was sound, and appellate courts typically defer to these decisions unless there's clear error. You're safe. Safe. The word seemed to settle over Celine like a blanket. She was safe. Her life was her own again. They left the library together, Patricia staying behind to handle the paperwork. Celine wanted air, needed to get out of that room where she'd been forced to defend her entire existence. They walked to the garden, her mother's garden, and stood among the roses. I can't believe it's over, she said, her voice still shaky. Not quite over, Elias said gently. You still have to decide what comes next. With them, with the estate, with everything. She looked back at the mansion, at the windows where she'd spent her childhood feeling trapped. I don't want anything from them. The trust is mine. The mediator made that clear. But the rest of it, the family business, this estate, let them have it. I never wanted it anyway. Are you sure? Completely. She turned to face him. I meant what I said in there. My life now, my apartment, my friends, my purpose, that's what matters. That's what's real. Before he could respond, he heard footsteps on the garden path. Vanessa approached slowly, her expression uncertain. She stopped a few feet away. I'm not here to argue, she said quickly, seeing Celine tense. I wanted to say something. In private. Elias started to step away, but Celine caught his arm. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Elias? Vanessa nodded, looking uncomfortable. All right. She struggled with the words. I'm sorry for what happened in there, for how we came at you. Philip was so convinced, and I just went along with it, and She wiped her eyes. You were right about everything. About us, about father, about what this family is. Celine's expression softened slightly. Vanessa, no, let me finish. When you left, I was angry. I thought you were abandoning us, being selfish. But watching you in there today, hearing you talk about why you left, her voice broke. I realized I'd been living the same lie you escaped from. I married for money and status. I play the role father wanted. And I'm miserable, Celine. I'm so miserable. Then leave, Celine said softly. Like I did. It's not too late. I don't have your courage. Vanessa looked down. I don't think I ever did. But maybe we could talk sometimes? Not about the business or the family or any of that. Just as sisters? Celine was quiet for a long moment. Elias could see her weighing the offer, deciding whether to extend trust to someone who'd hurt her. We can try, she said finally. But it has to be real, Vanessa. No more games, no more taking Philip's side against me. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be honest. I understand. Vanessa managed a small smile. Thank you for giving me a chance, she glanced at Elias. And thank you for defending her when we were too blind to see what we were doing. She walked away, leaving them alone again. Do you think she meant it? Elias asked. I don't know. But I have to at least give her the opportunity to mean it. Otherwise, I'm no better than Philip writing people off completely. They stayed in the garden a while longer, letting the victory settle, letting the tension of the last few days finally release. When they returned to the guest house to pack, Elias found a message on his phone from Lila. Dad, how did it go? Did you win? Call me as soon as you can. He called her back. She answered on the first ring. We won, he said, and heard her squeal of delight. I knew you would. I knew Celine would be okay. When are you coming home? We're packing now. Should be back by dinner. Good, because I made something for Celine. To celebrate. Can she come over? He looked at Celine, who was folding clothes into her bag. Lila wants to know if you can come to dinner tonight. She made something for you. Celine's face lit up. I'd love to. The drive home felt different than the drive there. Lighter. They talked about ordinary things, what they'd eat for dinner, what Lila might have made, how good it would be to sleep in their own beds. But underneath it all was the profound relief of having survived, of having won not just the legal battle, but something more important. The right to live authentically. They reached the city as the sun was setting. Elias dropped Celine at her apartment first so she could change and gather herself. "Come by around 7, he suggested. "I'll be there." At home, Lila launched herself at him the moment he walked in. "Dad, tell me everything." He told her a shortened version. The hearing, the testimony, the mediator's decision. She listened with wide eyes, asking questions, clearly proud of both of them. "I knew they couldn't win," she said firmly. "Celine is the smartest, kindest person. Anyone can see that." Well, the mediator saw it too, thankfully. "Good." She grabbed his hand. "Come see what I made." She led him to the kitchen. On the table was a handmade card, beautifully decorated with drawings of buildings and gardens. Inside, in her careful handwriting, was a letter. "I wanted to write this for the hearing," she explained, "to tell them how much Celine means to us. But you left before I finished it, so I thought I'd give it to her tonight instead." Elias read the letter, his throat growing tight. "Dear Celine, my dad told me about your family and how they were saying mean things about you. I wanted you to know what I think, because I think it matters. Before I met you, I thought college was something for other people who had money and didn't have to worry about things like we do. I drew buildings and dreamed about becoming an architect, but I didn't really believe it could happen. Then you showed me that summer program. And when I got accepted, you were just as excited as I was. You believed in me before I believed in myself, but that's not even the best thing you did. The best thing is how you're friends with my dad. After Mom died, he was so sad for so long. He tried to hide it, but I could tell. He worked all the time and worried all the time, and I knew he was doing it for me. But it made me sad too. Since he met you, he smiles more. He talks about things other than work and bills. He has a friend who makes him happy. You gave him that, and that's worth more than anything. You're not crazy or wrong or any of the things your family said. You're just good. And good people sometimes do things that other people don't understand, but that doesn't make them wrong. You're family to us now, not because of money or because you have to be, but because we choose you. And I hope you choose us too. Thank you for everything. Thank you for believing in me and for making my dad happy and for being exactly who you are. Love, Lila." Elias set the letter down, his vision blurred. "Lila, this is beautiful. Do you think she'll like it? She's going to love it." When Celine arrived at 7, they had dinner ready. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but made with care. She looked more relaxed than he'd seen her in weeks, wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down. Lila presented the card ceremonially. "This is for you, for winning today and for being our friend." Celine opened it and read the letter. Tears started falling before she was halfway through. By the end, she was openly crying, clutching the card to her chest. "Lila," she managed, "this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me." She hugged Lila tightly, and Elias watched his daughter hug her back, both of them holding on like they'd known each other forever, like family. Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing. Celine told Lila more about the hearing, the appropriate parts anyway. Lila told Celine about her plans for the summer program, about the buildings she wanted to design. They laughed and ate and existed together in that small kitchen, 3 people who'd found each other by accident and become something more. After Lila went to bed, Elias and Celine sat on the couch with tea. The apartment was quiet, peaceful. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything you did this week. For standing with me when you didn't have to. I wanted to. You're important to me, Celine. To both of us." She looked at the card Lila had made, still in her hands. "I've never had this before. This feeling of belonging somewhere. Not because of obligation or blood, but because of choice. Because someone actually wants me in their life." "We do," he said simply. "We absolutely do." "I want to do something," she said after a moment. "Something meaningful with the trust fund. Not just helping individuals, though I'll keep doing that. But something bigger, a foundation maybe. For kids like Lila, talented, hard-working, but without the resources to pursue their dreams. That sounds perfect, and I want you and Lila involved. Not just as beneficiaries, but as part of it. Your perspective matters, Elias. You understand what real struggle looks like, what real need is. I need that perspective if I'm going to do this right. He thought about it. I'd be honored. But I'm keeping my day job. I like who I am, what I do. I don't want that to change, she smiled. I wouldn't want you to change either. You're perfect exactly as you are. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd saved each other in different ways. He thought about that night 6 months ago, pulling over in the rain, making the choice to stop when everyone else kept driving. It had seemed like a small thing then, just helping someone in trouble, but it had become everything. It had brought connection and friendship and hope into his life. It had shown Lila that kindness mattered, that taking risks for others was worth it. It had given Celine the courage to stand up to her family and fight for her freedom. One choice, one moment of compassion, and everything had changed. What are you thinking about? Celine asked, about how strange life is, how one decision can ripple out in ways you never expect. The accident, she said. Understanding immediately, yeah, if I'd driven past that night, if I'd been too tired or too afraid or just assumed someone else would stop. But you didn't. You stopped. That's who you are. And you stayed, he said. After you recovered, after you knew you were safe, you stayed in our lives. That's who you are. She rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that, watching the lights of the city through the window, feeling the weight and wonder of the friendship they'd built. Tomorrow, life would return to normal. He'd go to work. Lila would go to school. Celine would start planning her foundation. The routine would continue, but everything was different now, better, fuller, because sometimes the most important thing you can do is pull over when everyone else keeps driving, and sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. 6 months passed like a breath, like a heartbeat, like the steady rhythm of a life finally finding its balance. The foundation launched on a clear October morning, exactly 1 year after the accident that had brought them together. They called it Second Chances, simple, direct, honest about what it meant. The first scholarship center opened in a renovated building downtown, its lobby filled with photographs of students who'd been helped, programs that had been funded, futures that had been changed. Elias stood in that lobby now, adjusting his tie, still the same navy shirt, but with a proper tie this time, and looking at the dedication plaque mounted on the wall. Brass, elegant, engraved with words Celine had chosen carefully, in honor of second chances, because everyone deserves the opportunity to become who they're meant to be. Lila was there, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself, her hair pulled back neatly. She was among the first group of scholarship recipients heading to a prestigious architecture program next summer. Her portfolio had grown thick with designs, each one more ambitious than the last. She stood with other students now, all of them chatting nervously about the event, about meeting the donors, about what this opportunity meant. Celine moved through the crowd with quiet grace, stopping to talk with each student personally, learning their names, their dreams, their stories. She wore a simple black dress and minimal jewelry, still herself, still choosing substance over flash. But there was something different about her now, a lightness, a peace that came from living in alignment with her values. The event began with speeches. Local officials praised the foundation's work. Patricia, now serving on the board, spoke about the legal right to pursue your own path. Then it was Celine's turn. She stepped to the microphone, and the room quieted. "A year ago," she began, "I was in a car accident on Highway 40. My car hit a guardrail in the rain, and I thought, in that moment of impact, that my life was ending. But a man stopped. Elias Brenner pulled over when everyone else kept driving. He stayed with me, held my hand, and kept me alive until help arrived." She found Elias in the crowd and smiled. He didn't know who I was, didn't know if I was rich or poor, important or ordinary. He just saw someone who needed help, and he helped. That simple act of compassion changed everything, because here's what I learned that night. We save each other, not with grand gestures or massive interventions, but with small choices, with deciding to stop when it would be easier to keep going, with offering help when it would be simpler to look away, with believing in someone's potential even when they can't see it themselves. She gestured around the room. This foundation exists because of that lesson, because I learned that the best use of resources isn't accumulation, it's connection. It's opening doors for people who deserve to walk through them. It's giving talented, hard-working students the opportunities that circumstances have denied them. Her voice strengthened. Every person in this room, every scholarship recipient, every volunteer, every supporter, you're part of something bigger than any one of us. You're part of a belief that potential matters more than privilege, that compassion matters more than status, that we're all responsible for pulling over when someone needs us. She paused, looking at the students. To the young people receiving scholarships today, you earned this, not because someone felt sorry for you, but because you showed talent, dedication, and promise. Use these opportunities, work hard, dream big, and someday when you're in a position to help someone else, remember this moment. Remember that you were given a chance and pass it forward. She stepped back from the microphone to strong applause. Lila was called up next, along with the other scholarship recipients, to accept their awards formally. Elias watched his daughter cross the stage, confident and poised, accepting the certificate that represented 2 full years of advanced architecture training. When Lila thanked Celine from the podium for believing in me before I believed in myself, Elias felt his throat tighten. He thought about Sophia, wished she could see this moment. But somehow he felt like maybe she could, maybe wherever. She was smiling, proud of the daughter they'd raised and grateful to the friend who'd helped guide her forward. After the ceremony, after the photographs and congratulations and promises to stay in touch, the 3 of them stood together outside the building. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Should we go back to the accident site? Celine suggested quietly. To mark the anniversary, Elias and Lila both agreed. They drove in comfortable silence to Highway 40, to the stretch of road where it had all begun. The guardrail had been repaired, the road clear, but Elias remembered exactly where it had happened. He pulled onto the shoulder in approximately the same spot where he'd stopped that rainy night. They got out of the truck. The evening was peaceful, traffic light, the air cool with approaching autumn. This is where it started, Elias said, looking at the spot where Celine's car had been. No, Celine said softly, touching the guardrail. This is where we found each other. Lila stepped between them, taking both their hands. And where we learned that stopping to help someone can change everything. Not just for them, but for us too. They stood there together, 3 people who'd become family not through blood, but through choice, through compassion and courage, and the willingness to see each other as fully human. Celine had brought flowers, roses from her mother's garden, carefully tended and cut that morning. She placed them at the base of the guardrail, a small memorial to the moment that had transformed all their lives. Thank you, she said, though it wasn't clear if she was speaking to Elias, to fate, to her mother, or to something larger. Thank you for the second chance. They drove back to the city as darkness fell, the foundation building's lights visible in the distance. Tomorrow, Elias would go to work. He still operated that forklift, still wore those same worn boots, still found dignity and purpose in honest labor. Lila would go to school, her mind full of buildings she wanted to design and dreams she now believed she could achieve. Celine would continue her work with the foundation, helping more students, changing more lives, living with the freedom and purpose she'd fought so hard to claim. But tonight, they were just 3 people who'd found something rare and precious, authentic connection in a world that often valued everything else more. Elias thought about the journey that had brought them here, about pulling over in the rain and making a choice that seemed small but turned out to be everything, about accepting help when pride wanted him to refuse it, about standing by a friend when her whole world was trying to tear her down. He thought about courage. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the kind that shows up in quiet moments. The courage to stop when it's easier to keep driving. The courage to be vulnerable when it's safer to stay closed. The courage to choose authenticity over approval. And he thought about legacy. What we leave behind. What matters in the end. It wasn't wealth or status or power. It was the lives we touched, the hands we held, the moments we chose compassion over convenience, the times we pulled over. As they pulled up to his apartment building, Lila already talking about what she'd make for dinner, Celine laughing at something his daughter said, Elias felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete contentment. Not the absence of struggle or worry. Those would always be part of life, but the deep satisfaction of knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly the people who mattered most. Same time next week? Celine asked as they got out of the truck. I want to hear about Lila's new design project. Wouldn't miss it, Elias said. She hugged them both. Lila first, holding her tight, then Elias, her embrace warm and grateful. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. For pulling over that night, for being who you are, for showing me what family really means. Thank you for the same, he said simply. She walked to her car, waving as she drove away. Elias and Lila climbed the stairs to their apartment, still small, still modest, but filled with more warmth and hope than any mansion could hold. Inside, Lila immediately went to her room to work on sketches. Elias stood at the window, looking out at the city lights, at the life he'd built through hard work and love, and the occasional miracle of human connection. He thought about the foundation. Black, about those words Celine had chosen, because everyone deserves the opportunity to become who they're meant to be. He'd helped her become who she was meant to be, free, purposeful, surrounded by genuine connection, and she'd helped him and Lila become who they were meant to be. Hopeful, supported, believing in possibilities they'd once thought were reserved for other people. It had started with a car, wrapped around a guardrail, and a choice to pull over when everyone else drove past. But it had become so much more. It had become proof that compassion matters, that kindness ripples outward in ways we can't predict, that the smallest acts can save lives in ways that have nothing to do with survival and everything to do with truly living. Sometimes the most ordinary moment becomes the one that changes everything. Sometimes pulling over in the rain means pulling someone and yourself toward a future neither of you could have imagined. Sometimes saving a life means learning what it means to really live. And sometimes, just sometimes, the family you choose becomes the one that saves you in return. Elias smiled, turned from the window, and went to make dinner with his daughter. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, but tonight he was grateful. For second chances, for pulling over, for finding in the most unexpected way exactly what he and Celine and Lila had all been missing. Each other. And that, he thought, as Lila's laughter rang out from her room, was worth everything.